This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Annie Coleman in St. Louis, Missouri, in February 2006. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 19. 2 or 3 days and nights went by. I reckon I might say they swum by. They slid along, so quiet and smooth and lovely. Here's the way we put in the time. It was a monstrous big river down there, sometimes 1.5 miles wide. We run nights and laid up and hid daytimes. Soon as night was most gone, we stopped navigatin' and tied up, nearly always in the dead water under a towhead, and then cut young cottonwoods and willows and hid the raft with them. Then we set out the lines. Next we slid into the river and had a swim, so as to freshen up and cool off. Then we set down on the sandy bottom where the water was about knee-deep and watched the daylight come. Not a sound anywheres, perfectly still, just like the whole world was asleep, only sometimes the bullfrogs a-clutterin' maybe. The first thing to see lookin' away over the water was a kind of dull line. That was the woods on the other side. You couldn't make nothin' else out. Then a pale place in the sky. Then more paleness spreadin' around. Then the river softened up away off and warn't black any more, but gray. You could see little dark spots driftin' along ever so far away, tradin' scows and such things, and long black streaks, rafts. Sometimes you could hear a sweep screakin' or jumbled up voices. It was so still, and sounds come so far, and by you could see a streak on the water, which you know by the look of the streak that there's a snag there in the swift current which breaks on it and makes that streak look that way. And you see the mist curl up off of the water, and the east reddens up, and the river, and you make out a log cabin in the edge of the woods, away on the bank on the other side of the river, being a wood yard likely, and piled by them cheats so you can throw a dog through it anywheres. Then the nice breeze springs up and comes fannin' you from over there, so cool and fresh and sweet to smell on account of the woods and the flowers, but sometimes not that way, because they've left dead fish layin' around, gars and such, and they do get pretty rank, and next thing you got the full day and everything smilin' in the sun, and the songbirds just goin' it. A little smoke couldn't be noticed now, so we would take some fish off of the lines and cook up a hot breakfast, and afterwards we would watch the lonesomeness of the river, and kind o' lazy along, and by lazy off to sleep. Wake up by and look to see what done it, and maybe see a steamboat coughin' along upstream, so far off towards the other side you couldn't tell nothin' about her, only whether she was a stern wheel or side wheel. Then for about an hour there wouldn't be nothin' to hear nor nothin' to see, just solid lonesomeness. Next you'd see a raft slidin' by, away off yonder, and maybe a galoot on it choppin', because they're most always doin' it on a raft. You'd see the axe flash and come down. You don't hear nothin'. You see that axe go up again, and by the time it's above the man's head, then you hear the ka-chunk. It had took all that time to come over the water. So we would put in the day, lazyin' around, listenin' to the stillness. Once there was a thick fog, and the rafts and things that went by was beatin' tin pans so the steamboats wouldn't run over them. A scow or a raft went by so close we could hear them talkin' and cussin' and laughin'. Heard them plain, but we couldn't see no sign of them. It made you feel crawly. It was like spirits carryin' on that way in the air. Jim said he believed it was spirits, but I says, "No, spirits wouldn't say, 'Durn the durned fog.'" Soon as it was night out, we shoved. When we got her out to about the middle, we let her alone, and let her float wherever the current wanted her to. Then we lit the pipes and dangled our legs in the water and talked about all kinds of things. We was always naked, day and night, whenever the mosquitoes would let us. The new clothes Buck's folks made for me was too good to be comfortable, and besides, I didn't go much on clothes nohow. Sometimes we'd have that whole river all to ourselves for the longest time. Yonder was the banks and the islands across the water, and maybe a spark, which was a candle in a cabin window, and sometimes on the water you could see a spark or two, on a raft or a scow, you know, and maybe you could hear a fiddle or a song comin' over from one of them crafts. It's lovely to live on a raft. We had the sky up there all speckled with stars, and we used to lay on our backs and look up at them, and discuss about whether they was made or only just happened. Jim, he 'lowed they was made, but I 'lowed they happened. I judged it would have took so long to make so many. Jim said the moon could 'a' laid them. Well, that looked kind of reasonable, so I didn't say nothing against it, because I've seen a frog lay most as many, so of course it could be done. We used to watch the stars that fell, too, and see them streak down. Jim allowed they'd got spoiled and was hove out of the nest. Once or twice of a night we could see a steamboat slippin' along in the dark, and now and then she would belch a whole world of sparks up out of her chimblies, and they would rain down in the river and look awful pretty. Then she would turn a corner, and her lights would wink out, and her powwow shut off and leave the river still again. And by her waves would get to us, a long time after she was gone, and joggle the raft a bit.